Okay, you're ready to go. Let's jump into Sketch and get started. There's a few ways to launch it, obviously. Use whichever way you like. You can go for Spotlight with Command Space and type in Sketch there, although that'll find probably a bunch of other stuff. You can do your pinch and find it inside of your app launcher, your launch pad, rather, that Mac calls it, and that's in the later versions of Mac OS. There it is. It's kind of this shiny diamond. I'm not sure why it's a shiny diamond. And you can see the first thing we get is this sort of screen. Sketch has taken the time and effort to integrate with iCloud. So if you have this, obviously it's a Mac app, and you have an iCloud account, then you can just kind of create documents. And these documents will just live inside of iCloud. You can obviously use On My Mac and get the traditional file picker, but sort of the first thing you do is open a document. If not, you can come down here and select New Document. That's exactly what we're going to do. So we're presented with a pretty different interface. If you're used to the Adobe suite, this obviously looks extremely different, but lucky for us, if you're a Mac user, it looks exactly like other Mac apps. So you have this sort of toolbar here at the top, and you can see on the Thunderbolt display I've got a really big canvas I can see. Now over here on the left, we haven't really discussed it yet, but this is your layers and objects palette, and also you have page management here. We'll get into that a little bit later in the class. We have zoom and kind of navigation around. You can see we have a ruler on by default. That's pretty nice. It's in a set of units that you can assume is pixels because it is. It took me a while to kind of be like, okay, where exactly does it say it's pixels? And then over here is sort of your inspector / information panel. So this is the basic setup of this interface. Down here we have these things called style presets. We're going to talk about those a little bit later. And over on the top here, some of the few active buttons, you see we have shapes that we can insert, all these different types of shapes. We have vectors, which is the pen tool. It's the same way. You can see you even get a pen tool icon, so if you're used to Illustrator or Photoshop, very similar to that. Text tool. One of my favorite things about Sketch is that it renders text so well. The text that it renders looks way closer to a internet browser than it does in Photoshop or Illustrator. Then a whole bunch of stuff that's kind of non-selectable at the moment because we don't have anything here. And then we have some other active buttons up here. So we have view, where you can see I can show pixels. Now, you can't really see any difference there, so we'll talk about that once we start creating stuff. Hide pixels, I'll turn that on. Hide rulers. If you're not a ruler guy, I am a big ruler guy. Show grid, so you can see here there's a grid built into the program automatically. Hide grid, and then underneath that you actually have grid settings. Grid settings are really cool. Here they have a 960 grid, 960 pixel grid built in by default, which is pretty unbelievable because you have to always go and get a plugin or download a template file to make this happen in, say, Illustrator or Photoshop. Right here I can say it's 12 columns, 960 pixels wide. Obviously you can adjust all this. Gutters on the outside, how big the gutters are, how wide the columns are. Then of course if you want to do rows as well and do sort of a square grid, you can do that. Now here we have a square grid that will just set up pure squares and give it a thick line orientation. So I'm just going to say okay, and I'm going to show grid. So there's our square grid, right? Pretty cool. Grid settings, I'm going to go to a layout grid instead. Here, that's not bad. I'm going to hit OK. And actually what you can do here is you can pull the ruler. And you can see you can really start this wherever you want. So you can pull the ruler and reposition your guides and your documents. You can see I can go above and beyond this grid. Now if you want to do some editing to this grid, you can actually do it in the program's settings. So let's go up to Sketch and go into Preferences. And you can see we have a cool Retina canvas if you're using a Retina MacBook or a Retina computer of any sort. Zoom in on selection, that's not checked by default. Show animations. Skip shadows at higher zoom levels. I kind of leave that unchecked. Fill the grid that I do have. Stroke outline. Grid colors. See right here, we have these sort of gray lines. Well, you can go and change those if you prefer the sort of red, semi-transparent grid. You can kind of do that. But I'm just going to kind of go back to our default sort of gray. That's fine. Guides are red. Layers, this is all stuff that we can talk about later. So that's a real quick intro to sort of getting grids lined up. It doesn't really matter where you set up your documents inside of Sketch. Obviously, all of these rulers and positions can be edited at any point. And the way you edit these things is with an artboard. And artboards are coming up next.